Good evening and welcome to Wednesday, January the 8th, believe it or not, 2025 meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board for the City of Reading. I'm going to introduce the members of the board that are here this evening. Tom? You muted yourself, Tom. Tom, you muted yourself. Okay. All right. Jeff?
Jeff Catone, member of the board.
Charlie?
Charlie Jones, member of the board.
I'm Phil Rubina, member of the board and chairperson. Emily?
Emily Diaz-Melendez with the zoning office.
Thank you. Steve?
Steve Price, solicitor to the board.
Okay, thank you. We have one decision to issue this evening.
Two, actually, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon?
We have two, also 240719, which is Fairmount Avenue.
Okay. All right, we'll do 2411-0032, 213 South 11th. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. 2411-0031, 1010 Elm Street. We'll do that one.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the relief requested, subject to the conditions set forth in the written decision?
Make a motion.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay. Do you want to read that second one, Steve, please?
Yeah, this is appeal number 2407-0019. In re appeal of TSG Auto Service LLC with respect to a property located at 2010 Fairmount Avenue, rear lot, City of Reading, Berks County, Pennsylvania. This is over near the dips. It was for automobile storage. Is there a motion to approve the relief requested, subject to the conditions set forth in the written decision?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Jeff?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there questions or comments on the motion?
Sorry, real quick, sorry. Mr. Fox, I'm going to mute you when you're not speaking just because there's feedback. And so just remember when you're going to speak to unmute yourself at that point.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second. Are there questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it.
Please note that I recuse myself from this appeal
All right,
because I'm a member of the North End Rod and Gun Club.
gotcha.
Okay. Now we have a continued case. 2411-0032, 213 South 11th. Where are we with that?
Good evening, board. This is Tom Rothermel. I'm here. I'm ready to proceed with the hearing if the board's so inclined.
And you're the attorney?
I am. I'm stepping in for Malin Boyer tonight for the hearing.
All right, typically what Malin Boyer would do is he'd do an offer of proof with respect to the application, and then if there's any particulars, I guess that would be for Mr. Falanky, if anybody has any direct questions. You're representing them in an engineering capacity, Mr. Falanky?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
We have to swear in our zoning officer first.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
All right, I'll put some exhibits into the record. Exhibit number 1 is the notice. Exhibit number 2 is proof of publication of the notice. Exhibit number 3 is proof of posting of the notice. Exhibit number 4 is the application, including all its attachments. And exhibit number 5 is the zoning ordinance of the City of Reading as amended.
Okay, and I'm going to read the vita for this just so that the audience knows what's going on. The Reading Parking Authority is seeking variances for the following zoning ordinance sections: 600, 604 temporary uses, 600, 804 A R3 dimensional requirements, 600, 804 B R3 permitted by right uses. 600, 1,008 required buffering in off premises parking areas. 600, 1401A4 and 1401C buffer strips. 600-600, 1602D regarding the size of ADA parking spaces. 600, 1602H landscaping requirements. 600, 1602L distance of parking area to the dwelling. 600 to 1602M lighting requirements. 600, 1602N shade tree requirement. 600-1602P maximum grade requirement. 600-1603I parking of commercial vehicles and other relief as may be required to use the existing vacant lot as a temporary gravel parking lot. The applicant is also seeking an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision pertaining to the zoning ordinance section 1602D regarding the required size of ADA parking spaces. The subject property is located in the R3 residential zoning district, and the owner of record is the city of Reading. So if you'd like to enter your appearance and anybody you're going to have testify, we will have sworn in at this point.
Thank you, and good evening, board. My name is Tom Rothermel. I'm the attorney of record for the Reading Parking Authority for purposes of this hearing. I would have two witnesses tonight. One is Rafael Batista. He is the executive director of the Reading Parking Authority. I will proceed with an offer of proof for Mr. Batista's testimony. And the second witness will be Christopher Falenke, who is an engineer at McCarthy Engineering.
Okay, you may, we'll swear them in and then proceed.
All right, will you both please raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. With respect to Mr. Batista's testimony, I would offer the following offer of proof. The current property is located at 213 South 11th Street. It was formerly a manufacturing facility, since raised in, I believe, 2017. The city of Reading does own that property. The RPA has a leasehold interest in that property for a few years now. There were some minor improvements done to the property in 2023, but none since. There's been no active use of the property pending the board's approval of the variance relief that it seeks. At this point, the lot is proposed to be a total of 60 spaces, 10 of which would house or be able to fit a larger vehicle such as an RV. This whole process is being done through the citywide parking relief initiative in order to alleviate the significant parking concerns in the city. This relief, if granted, would do that. Mr. Falenke will testify further about the particulars of the variance relief that's being sought. The use of the lot itself would be open to the public, but it would be by permit only, such that it would not be, you would need permit to enter and use the lot. There is no stated opposition to the proposed use, and that is the offer of proof for Mr. Batista's testimony.
Do any members of the board have any particular questions for Mr. Batista?
If you're going to, if they're going to do this by permit, are there going to be gates there that control that? Would that be by a card system, or would the vehicles simply have a sticker on them or something like that?
It is my understanding that it would be a sticker permit type use.
Okay. Thank
Mr.
you.
Rubin, if you're familiar with the Burke's Packing, down along Burke's Packing, there's a neighborhood parking relief lot down there similar to one proposed here. And I've seen on many times as I drive by there, Reading Parking Authority patrols it and double checks to make sure that they have permit parking. There's no gates.
Right.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members have any questions?
Yep.
Anybody in the audience have any questions?
I have some questions.
And your name and address, please?
Oh, this is Emily, sorry.
Oh,
Just want me.
Go
But
ahead.
I don't think I don't see anyone else here. My first question, have there been any other, design proposals for this lot?
With respect to what in particular exactly?
Just the overall design of the parking lot.
Mr. Falinki can speak to that, but it's my understanding that the current plan is the most recent.
Mr. Palanky, have there been any other, proposals for the design of this lot that is different, like vastly different from what's being proposed now?
We did a sketch about 2 years back for the Reading Parking Authority, where we basically, the parking lot today is fully stoned. It's 100% stoned, and actually there are people parking on the lot now. So the proposal we had almost 2 years ago basically said we want to use the parking lot as is. This proposal is trying to make it more compliant with the city in showing the actual spaces and buffering, et cetera. So that's the only two plans that I'm aware of.
Okay, in regards to the gravel, is the gravel temporary or is the overall use temporary? Which part of this is temporary?
What's temporary about it is the Reading Parking Authority holds a lease on this property. So at any time when that lease expires, the city of Reading could take it over and do something else with it. That's a temporary part of this.
Okay, and so is that the reason why to keep it gravel instead of paving it?
We do ask for it to be gravel, but the plan I show, as I submitted, I do show that it could be paved.
Okay. Another question I have, so if this is supposed to be for the citywide parking relief, I guess, have you done neighborhood surveys or some kind of study to show the neighborhood need for parking spaces for RVs or larger vehicles like that?
I have not been involved with the study. I know the parking authority did some work a few years back. Actually, the parking lot that Mr. Price referenced, that parking lot there, we had worked with the authority in putting large spaces there also, just couldn't fit. So they are trying to accommodate some large spaces. So this space here is probably an outcome of that study.
Mr. Rothermel, are you aware of if there was any studies or anything for an overall need for these type of parking spaces for the relief program?
I'm not aware of a formal study, although there's been discussion, as Mr. Falinki stated. It was simply added to the plan to offer flexibility, not only for residents who may have an RV or a larger vehicle to store there, but also for the city. If the city has a larger vehicle that it would be in need of storing at this location, it could do so as well. So it was just to offer some flexibility, and there's only 10 spaces of the total of 60. And to your prior question about the gravel, it is currently a gravel lot, but as Mr. Falinki stated, the parking authority intends to pave it, assuming relief is granted.
Okay, thank you. I guess my last question would be, because I know that there have been multiple conversations with different city departments regarding some other parking projects. Has there been any discussion with any of it, whether it be city management or anyone else in the city regarding the design of this lot?
I'm not aware of any discussions with city management for this particular lot.
Okay,
And to that point as well, we've received no feedback, negative or otherwise, from the city with respect to the current design.
sorry, I do have one more. Is there a reason why the lot couldn't be configured to utilize the all, like, the entrance already provided through the alley instead of creating curb cuts along South 11th and Wonder Street?
Yeah, Mr. Flunky was going to address that as part of his testimony here today, but Chris, if you want to jump in and answer that preliminarily, that's fine.
Certainly. In order to get the larger vehicles in, we have to have a larger entrance. And looking at that alley is just not wide enough to get those type of vehicles in safely. And at the same time, it does lose parking spaces, of which parking spaces is the purpose of this whole plan, is to get as many parking spaces for city residents. So that's why we approach it in this scenario using the main streets.
In addition, Chris, is there a concern with ease of entrance and exit in terms of safety using the main existing two entrances to the lot as opposed to cutting into the alley?
Well, when you use the alley, you have to understand that alley is abutting homes and other garages, so your sight distances are limited out to the alley. So using a driveway entrance off that alley is just going to make it difficult to getting onto the main street. Whereas with the proposal we have, we're further away from the alley that gives you better sight distances.
And how many spaces would you lose potentially if you would exit or have an entryway into or from the alley?
At least 3, possibly even 4.
All right, thank you.
That's all I have for now.
Mr. Rabina,
Yes,
am I on?
yes.
I just seem to be a little, I'm not being flippant here, a little bit loose with that term, recreational vehicle. I think I would like to see some dimensions, because RV could be something small. It could be something, 20 feet long, a towable job. I don't know. I'd also want to make certain that the vehicle is parked and that it wouldn't be used for storage. As you know, it's okay to have a non up-to-date car or vehicle if it's off the main highway. But if it's if it could be stored in there for a while, length of time, I'd hate to see that be. I'd hate to see a lot being abused. Not that it would happen, but I would like to see some outline as to what they envision the sizes of quote unquote RVs to mean, in fairness to the rest of the public.
Mr. Palenque, can you answer the dimensions of those 10 large spaces?
I can share my screen. I can do that.
Yes.
Is that screen being seen by everybody?
I don't
Not
know.
yet.
No.
That should be now. We good?
Yeah,
That's good, Chris.
Okay, right here, 10 by 35 is the parking space for the larger spaces. 9 by 18 is a regular car space.
Excellent. You've answered the question.
thank you.
I would, unless anybody else has questions, I would propose to have Mr. Falenki formally address the various variance relief that we're seeking.
All right,
Go ahead.
I'm just going to go down, and you should have that in the application, what we call the supplement to the zoning hearing board application. And that spells out each of the sections that were stated earlier. And the section is 600-604. Again, today, this parking lot is basically 100% stoned. We would really, with the relief we're asking for tonight, we'd like to keep it in stone and keep the steeper slopes that are shown in here. However, if not granted, then we do have a plan that works with the intent of the ordinance, but it does still require relief. Also, being a temporary use, as I said earlier, the city of Reading actually owns this property. So at any time, when the lease expires, they could take it over and develop it as a project of some sort, whichever the zoning allows. The next section is 608-04A, impervious surface. Again, the existing lot is 100% stone. Prior to that, it was a industrial building, which was pretty much covered the entire lot except for a small parking area in the back. So it was also basically 100% impervious. We're again asking that that remains that way. But again, in the alternative, we do propose an alternative that gives some green space to the area, trying to meet the ordinance as much as possible. 600-804B. Again, this is regarding this. We had the discussion earlier about allowing the public to use it. The public will have that parking pass to come in and use the facility. 600-1008, buffering. So this section, there's various sections throughout the ordinance regarding bufferings in different sections, so they all sort of tie together. And I'll give the global overview of it, and just as we get to the other sections, I'll just briefly talk about those. But in this particular situation here, a fully stoned lot, we do not want to buffer. But again, in the alternative, if we have to buffer, we can do some buffering. But the plan that shows the best buffering that we can do or offer at this time are some trees on the corners of the property, because the areas we're proposing to put some stormwater control, and the area along the alleys have some steep slopes associated with them. So the biggest issue with buffering, a full buffering of all these boundaries here, is a safety concern with the being security, to secure the parking lot and enforcement. So we are preparing some landscaping, but not full buffering, again, for safety purposes. 600-1401A4, the 5 foot again. So we have, I'm not on the right page, that's why, okay. So here we don't meet the requirement for that buffer strip, so we're asking a variance from this distance to the alley of 5.2 feet. The next section, 600-1401C, landscape planting. Again, that's all tied together, what I stated earlier about buffering entire property lines. 600-1402A, again, this is landscaping, same section. Again, security is very important to us here, and the more plants and trees you put out there, it gets difficult to enforce. 600-1503A, clear sight triangles. Again, we had the discussion earlier. If we use this alley, we have very little sight distance here and here, whereas if we move these entrances to where they're shown, we'll have better sight distance. But in the ordinance, it requires a clear sight triangle, which is a very large triangle, which then it will eliminate parking spaces. So what we're proposing in the alternative is to use the PennDOT requirements for safe sight distance, which basically clears a path along the road itself, but not affect the parking spaces. 600-1602B, the 15-foot alley. Again, we had that discussion. It's just to use this alley as an access. It loses parking spaces as well as creates an access issue with these existing homes where they're at today. 600-1602D, ADA spaces. We show parking spaces here on the plan in this alternative, what the city is requiring. However, ADA code allows, this is the required per codes, and it's an 8-foot wide space. What that allows us to, if we go to the 8-foot wide space, which is universally allowed, it gives us more green space or more area to plant maybe a bush or a tree or something like that. So that's why we're asking for that relief to use this design rather than the city design. So what happens in a case like this, maybe this area becomes a little larger that I could plant some trees or shrubberies there. 600-1602H, again, landscaping buffering, same situation. 600-1602L, 10-foot buffering to 5. That requirement is here. As you can see, we have an encroachment on this house. Now we show a 6-foot dimension, but it's actually 5 foot where this house is. And this allows for the vehicles to turn around. That's the reason why we need that relief.
So Chris, if I can just interrupt there, there's no cars that are going to be parking with the headlights facing those houses, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
This is strictly a turnaround area. 600-1602M, existing lighting. So the project today has, there you see this light right in here. We survey located these lights. We have this light and we have these lights. So we would like to keep those lights there and utilize that in our program for lighting, since it is today. If there was a problem with that lighting, I'm sure the city would be receiving complaints from the residents. What we don't want to do is start adding more lights to this area here. We believe the lighting that we have out there is sufficient enough for what we want to do, even in this alternative. In this alternative, you can see the light here, 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 and here being preserved. So the lighting is done, although this lighting probably doesn't meet the requirements of the city, it does provide sufficient lighting. So that's why we ask for that variance. 600-1602N, eliminate the requirement for shade trees. Our interpretation of the ordinance when they're talking about shade trees is trying to put like more bump outs in the island to provide more shade to the parking lot areas and so forth. We believe we've placed where we feel the trees would be safe so that the plows don't hit them, of course, as well as providing enough shade for the area.
And Chris, if I can interrupt you here, if you would add additional bump outs into the lot for purposes of compliance with that section, it would eliminate additional spaces, correct?
Correct.
So the current plan, as you show here on the screen, which shows the shade trees at the perimeter of the plan, that maximizes the space, the parking spaces to the residents.
Yes, it does. And 600-1602P is slope. So in the existing condition today, there's about a 12% grade slope in this area here. There, as I said, they were currently parking on that area today. So maybe not officially, but they are. And we'd like to maintain that scenario so that it's not costly to get a similar or a grade for this section. Problem becomes if we do this alternative, I still need relief, but we'd have to add a retaining wall here to get close to your ordinance, but I still need relief because I have a 6.5%, little over 6.5% slope here. To maintain a 5% would create some real deep cuts and a lot of excavation going on out here to meet that ordinance. So we can get close to the 5%, but however, we would prefer to leave the lot the way it is today. The next section is 600-1603L, and that is dealing with the parking spaces of these large spaces, the 10 by 35 spaces, asking for relief to use this area, this zone for these types of vehicles. And the last one is interpretation, again, of the handicap parking spaces. Again, the plan does show the 9 by 18 spaces, and we're looking for the 8 by 18 spaces.
And Chris, on that point, if necessary, could you add a third ADA accessible space to the plan?
Yes, if we get the relief on the 8x18, there's enough lawn area in here. I think that we could get that extra space in here without losing any parking spaces.
Thank you.
I believe I've covered all the sections quickly, but ready for any questions.
Members of the board have any questions for Mr. Falinki?
I don't have any. I think he did a good job of hitting all those points.
Yep.
Any
Anybody,
members of- Sorry.
Emily, questions?
Just one. If there weren't being proposed those parking spaces for the larger vehicles and RVs, would an entrance in the alley be more feasible?
We're talking about this alley here. Actually, out of all the alleys,
No, that's not the alley I'm talking about. I'm
you're
talking,
talking about this alley. Well,
yeah,
these,
if we,
I got you.
yeah, if
Okay.
we didn't need that turning radius for a larger vehicle, if this parking lot was all for regular, daily drivers, is it more feasible to get that entrance off of the alley that runs from 11th to Wonder? Is that more feasible that way?
It becomes more feasible because we are talking about automobiles. However,
Yes.
I believe your zoning, I'm trying to find if I did load up your report. Yes. So you have a very good picture in your summary. If you really look at that alley, that's still a very narrow alley. And to have the cars use this alley, this access alley right through here to get in, I don't feel comfortable as an engineer to encourage that. At this is a large lot with a large volume of traffic. I believe the entrance would be right about this location here where this picture is showing. It makes for a cleaner access and great visibility to the site. That's me speaking as an engineer for safety point of view.
And again, Chris, even if the RV spaces were eliminated, by creating that entrance into the alley, you're losing at least 3 spaces potentially.
Oh, yes.
All right. Any members of the audience have any questions for Mr. Falinki?
We have one person with a question.
Name and address, please.
Prince Rothermel, 329 Douglas Street, Reading.
Yes, Mr. Rothwell?
Is the surrounding neighborhood residential in character?
Yes, it is. Well, there is a church within the area, but most of it is residential. Yes.
I'm a past planning professional, I guess. And the requirements in the zoning ordinance, especially regarding landscaping and setbacks, is to protect the quality of life, and especially in residential neighborhoods. And in my opinion, the parking authority kind of routinely requests variances and relief from requirements for landscaping. And I think that's really not necessarily desirable in residential neighborhoods. When the ordinance asks for additional trees, they don't have to be necessarily interior trees, they can be street trees. With respect to, and I haven't spent much time with this plan except what I hear tonight in the presentation, which is a good presentation. The turnaround that's on the bottom of the plan, I think the statement was made that is as close as it is to the residents adjoining the property in that location, because you'd lose a couple parking spaces. Well, there are some.
I think, Mr. Rothwell, we're gonna have to swear you in because you're not asking a question, you're testifying. So let's swear Mr. Rothwell in, and he can affirm what he just stated as testimony, and then he can go forward.
Whatever you'd like.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Rothman, what you just previously testified to, you're affirming now that you're under oath, correct?
Correct.
All right, proceed then.
Now, that's pretty much my statement. Again, in my opinion, the parking authority, in a number of presentations in a number of areas of the city where they're trying to maximize parking spaces, they're doing that with losing some of the quality of life features and requirements of the zoning ordinance. And I think that's unfortunate. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rothermel by members of the board? Any questions from the lawyer for the applicant to Mr. Rothermel?
I do not, but I would just ask Mr. Falenki a couple questions in response, if I may.
All right,
Mr. Falenki, can you again indicate to the board why there is a request for variance relief of the landscape requirements?
The section of the ordinances gets into very much a lot of details, adding a lot of plants and shrubberies throughout the parking lots, and then that all diminishes the number of parking spaces that you could put out there. Now, what we've done in the past, we've asked for relief from the zoning hearing board. One of your conditions from the zoning hearing board, though, is we need to go through city planning. And as we go through that process, we do end up putting in as many more trees that we've shown during these applications. So we do work with the city. We have put street trees out there. We probably will in this case also. So it's not that we're going to, close the door, that we're not going to do anything. But with that relief, that gives us some flexibility to say, okay, we may not need 25, we need 25 trees, but we can do 10. That's because we could do that with the variance. And that's the whole purpose of this variance right now.
And Chris, in addition, if you, I guess for lack of a better term, if you screen too much, that causes safety issues as well, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I don't have anything further.
all right. Does anybody want to give testimony in favor of this application? Hearing none. Mr. Rothermel's already raised his concern. Is there anybody else in the audience who wants to testify with respect to this application against it?
Don't you have to be a neighbor? That's not the.
Who's this?
Don't you have to be a neighbor?
Who's speaking?
Sorry, it's someone in the audience that they wanted to provide testimony, but they don't live in the area.
Neither does he. He lives on the 200 block of Douglas. And he's talking as a matter actually.
Where does he live?
I live in the 200 block of Windsor.
I can't hear him.
If you want to sit up here so that the mic can get you.
I live in the 200 block of Windsor.
How far is that from this parking?
There you go. About 20 blocks away, 25 blocks away.
Yeah, you can't testify. You're too far away.
I do have a couple comments though, because I didn't provide any recommendations in my staff report.
All right, we'll put him in.
Okay, my comments would be that without seeing any kind of formal study for a need for those kinds of vehicles, I don't believe that those types of spaces are necessary. I would prefer to see some of those be for regular vehicles, if that's the entire intent of the citywide parking relief program is for these regular vehicles to get them off the street and provide more parking for residents. I also believe that there's an ability to provide a lot more landscaping to preserve that that quality of life aspect. Most of these lots do have camera surveillance, so I don't see how some additional landscaping would severely impact maintaining safety in these lots if there's cameras and if the car, the Reading Parking Authority vehicle can go into patrol as well. With that said, you can take my comments and give it the due consideration for for your deliberations and whether you decide to allow the relief.
So we'll close the evidentiary portion of this hearing. A decision will be made and rendered at the next zoning hearing in February of 2025. You do not need to be present. A copy of the decision will be mailed to you.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, just in closing, I believe the requirements of the for variance relief has been met. Clearly, there's a hardship, not the doing of the RPA. This certainly serves a legitimate need for the residents of the city, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, the next appeal before us.
Sorry, Phil, real quick, we have a request from the interpreter to move the appeal for 1506 North 13th Street ahead, just because he has another prior commitment that is going to take place. So that way we can retain our interpreter for that appeal.
Okay. I'm sorry, I could barely hear what you were saying. I'm not sure what the problem was, but Mr. Price.
So our interpreter has another meeting.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
and the appeal that required an interpreter is 1506 North 13th Street, which is the last one on the agenda. He has
Okay.
requested that it be moved up.
I think we could I think we can accommodate that. We've done that before. So we'll go to appeal 2411-0035, 1506 North 13th Street. Okay, and we appreciate the indulgence of everybody involved here. All right, you want to swear in, Emily, please?
Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You do.
Thank you.
Has notice for this appeal been given?
It has.
Okay, Mr. Price.
Thanks. I'll put some exhibits. Exhibit number 1 is the notice. Exhibit number 2 is proof of publication of the notice. Exhibit number 3 is proof of posting of the notice. Exhibit number 4 is the application, including all of its attachments. And exhibit number 5 is the zoning ordinance of the city of Reading as amended.
Okay, you want to swear in our interpreter, please?
Do you swear to interpret truthfully and accurately to the best of your ability?
I do. Can only certified co-interpreter.
Okay, all right. Yolinda Aries is seeking a special exception approval to operate a daycare home on the property. She is also seeking an appeal of the zoning administrator's determination indicating that a daycare center is not permitted in an R2 zoning district. In the alternative, she is requesting a variance to operate a daycare center and a variance from the required off-street parking standards. The subject property is located in R2 residential zoning district in the Heights Conservation District. The owners of record are Genesis Munoz and Yolinda Aries. Okay.
La apelación 241135 para el 1506 norte de la calle 13. Iluminada Arias busca la aprobación de una excepción especial para operar una guardería de niños en la propiedad. Ella también está buscando una apelación de la determinación del administrador de zonificación que indica que una guardería de niños no está permitida en el distrito de zonificación residencial R2. Como alternativa, ella está solicitando una varianza para operar una guardería de niños y una varianza de las normas requeridas de estacionamiento fuera de la calle. La propiedad en cuestión está ubicada en el distrito de zonificación R2 y en el distrito de conservación Heights. Los propietarios registrados son Génesis Muñoz y Iluminada Arias.
Hey, Karen,
Thank
so
you, Ken.
your volume is a little low. I don't know if you could bring your mic closer to your mouth. or
Is
anything.
the applicant present? Is the applicant present?
¿El aplicante está
Sí.
presente?
Sí.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are you represented by an attorney or are you representing yourself?
¿Está usted representada por un abogado o se está representando usted misma?
Yo misma.
Myself.
Okay. Mr. Price, do you want to ask some questions and then we'll
Sure.
go through this later?
You own the property, ma'am?
Usted es dueña de la
She
propiedad.
needs
Oh,
to
she
be
wasn't sworn in.
sworn.
Vamos a hacer juramentada, señora.
Please
Levante
raise
su
your
mano
right
derecha.
hand. Please raise your right hand.
Levante su mano derecha, por favor.
Okay.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
¿Usted jura que la declaración que va a presentar ahora es la verdad, toda la verdad y nada más que la verdad?
Sí.
Yes.
Ms. Arias, you own that property?
Señora Arias, ¿usted es dueña de esa propiedad?
Sí.
Yes.
Do you reside there?
¿Usted vive ahí?
Sí.
Yes.
Who else resides there?
¿Quién más vive ahí?
Génesis Muñoz, mi esposo Aquiles Muñoz, y
Génesis
mi hijo
Muñoz, my husband, Aquiles Muñoz, and my
Aquiles
son,
Muñoz,
¿cómo se llama?
Emmanuel Muñoz.
Aquiles Emmanuel Muñoz.
You're gonna have to spell those names for me, please, Ken.
Okay. Señora, Genesis is the one that's on the actual document, which is
Okay,
Genesis, Genesis. Quiles con Q o con K, señora.
Con Q, con G de gato, con Aquiles, con Q. Con Q.
Okay, okay.
Aquiles.
Aquiles is Q-U-I-L-E. ¿Es Z o S al final?
Z.
Es
Mu-
Z.
No, Aquiles Muñoz, Aquiles,
Oh, Aquiles.
S.
Okay.
Muñoz con Z.
Okay. So the second name I'm going to respell that. It's Aquiles. Second last name Muñoz, Munoz. Munoz. ¿Y la otra persona quién es?
Emmanuel Muñoz.
Emmanuel Muñoz, Enmanuel. And last name again, Munoz.
Now, you've been operating a daycare in this property without permits, correct?
Usted ha estado operando una guardería de niños en esta propiedad hasta ahora sin permisos, ¿verdad?
Sí, pero me mudé y no sabía las reglas.
Yes, because when I moved here, I did not know the rules.
And you don't have a license from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Welfare to operate, do you?
Y tampoco tiene usted una licencia del Departamento de Salud de Pensilvania para operar esto, ¿correcto?
Yo lo tenía en otra casa, pero me mudé reciente en esta y aún no la tengo.
I did have that in my other house, but I recently moved to this one. I do not have it.
Well, you've been operating this for over a year, correct?
Pero usted ha estado operando esta guardería por más de un año, ¿correcto?
No, no
No,
más de un año, no.
no more than a year, no.
Right, but about a year.
Pero más o menos un año.
¿Cuánto meses? 8 meses.
8 months.
So you had a permit at the last place, but you didn't get a permit for this place, correct?
Entonces, usted tenía un permiso para el lugar donde estaba anteriormente, pero no tiene un permiso para este lugar, ¿correcto?
Sí, tenía mi licencia, ya no.
So you did know.
Yes, I had my license, but I no longer do.
Okay, so you knew you needed a license.
Pero usted sí sabía que necesitaba una licencia.
Sí, yo estaba en eso. Estaba esperando a comprar la casa para mudarme y hacer el proceso.
Yes, I was waiting to buy the house, move in, and do the process.
Now, when the state inspected your property due to complaints, they found that you were taking care of 21 children in a residential home. Is that correct?
Cuando el Estado inspeccionó su casa debido a querellas, ellos descubrieron que usted estaba cuidando a 21 niños, sin, did you say with 21 kids without the permission, she said? Is that what you said?
Yeah, she didn't have a license. She had
Okay.
21
Sí.
children in her home that were being given care.
Sí, 21 niños sin la licencia, ¿correcto?
Sí, porque estaba en el proceso de la licencia, por eso estaba.
Yes, but I was in the process of getting the license.
Okay. Okay, that doesn't answer the question. She had 21 children in a home, in a private residence.
Tenía, pero no tengo.
Sí, eso no responde a la pregunta. La pregunta es si tiene tenía 21 niños en la casa sin la licencia, cuidando a 21 niños sin la licencia, ¿correcto?
En ese momento que vinieron, sí, pero no siempre tenía esos niños.
At the
Yeah.
time in the moment they came, yes, but I didn't always have that many kids.
How many children does she propose to take care of if she gets her zoning relief?
Si le dan la excepción de zonificación, si se la aprueba, ¿cuántos niños usted planea cuidar?
13.
13.
Plus her children?
Además de sus propios hijos,
Mis hijos están grandes.
my kids are grown.
What would her hours of operation be?
¿Cuáles serían sus horas de laborales?
Las que ustedes crean conveniente. La que ustedes crean conveniente, la que ustedes me digan.
The hours you indicate to me are convenient.
I have no idea what that means.
No sé qué significa eso.
Ok, de 6 a 6.
6 to 6,
Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday.
lunes a sábado, lunes a viernes.
De lunes a sábado.
¿Ah?
A sábado, mediodía.
Lunes a sábado, mediodía.
Sí.
Monday through Saturday, midday Saturday.
And does she have enough square footage to take care of 13 children?
¿Y tiene suficiente pies cuadrados para cuidar a 13 niños?
Sí, me parece que sí.
Yeah, I believe so.
How many bathrooms does she have?
¿Cuántos baños tiene?
3.
2, I mean 3.
Well, okay.
Pero 2 hay 2.
Is there a bathroom in the basement?
¿Hay un baño en el sótano?
Sí,
Yes.
Is there a bathroom on the first floor?
¿Hay un baño en el primer piso?
sí,
Yes.
And the daycare would only be run on the first floor in the basement, correct?
Y la guardería de niños solamente se operaría en el primer piso y en el sótano, ¿verdad?
sí.
Yes.
Yeah. Does she provide food for the children or do they bring their own food?
¿Usted proveería comida para los niños o ellos traerían su propia comida?
Las 2.
Both.
Both. Does she have outdoor fenced-in play area?
Tiene una área afuera que tiene verja, que está.
Sí.
Yes.
How large is the outdoor play area?
¿Cuán grande es el área de juego afuera?
Yo no sé decir. Yo cogí la medida y la llevé allá a la oficina, pero no, yo no me la sé. Mi hijo me hizo eso.
I couldn't tell you.
Pero tengo suficiente espacio.
Un momento, señora.
Ujú.
I couldn't tell you. I did provide the measurements to the office, but I couldn't. But I do have enough space.
North 13th Street's a pretty busy street. Where do the children get dropped off? In front or in the rear?
El norte de la calle 5 es una área grande. ¿Dónde es que a los niños los dejarían, los recogerían? El norte de la calle 13 es un área grande.
Sí. ¿Dónde lo recogerían? Oh, por el frente y también por la parte de atrás.
In the front and also in the rear.
And has she had any complaints from her neighbors with respect to pickup, drop off, or the intensity of this use?
¿Usted ha tenido alguna querella de los vecinos en cuanto a las recogidas o las dejadas, la intensidad de esa clase de uso?
Sí, había un señor sí que me dijo que le incomodaba eso, que de vez en cuando iba a salir había un carro parqueado ahí, en la
Yes,
parte de atrás.
Yes, there was a gentleman that complained about in the rear, sometimes if he was going to go out, there was a car there.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay, just something I would like to add to this. She needs to be aware that she needs to provide a description as to where the children will be dropped off and picked up. And it's not something that Public Works will determine for her. She has to pick and choose the location, and depending what she picks and chooses, that would be part of the decision that would be made by the board.
Ok. Tiene que estar al tanto de que usted tiene la obligación de proveer una descripción de dónde se van a dejar a los niños y dónde van a recoger a los niños. No es algo que la agencia de trabajos de obras públicas va a determinar. Eh, Usted tendría que entender que usted tiene que hacer eso y es parte de lo que necesitaríamos para hacer una decisión en cuanto a esto.
And I think the other point I would like to make is I reviewed the comments from the inspection that was done by the child welfare people. And there's a number of safety violations there that I think would need to be addressed. So I think before this board considers anything, they would have to have a full fire inspection and construction, codes inspection to make sure that everything is exactly as it needs to be.
Y antes de que podamos hacer una decisión, también se tiene que estar al tanto que se tienen que hacer inspecciones para los códigos de fuego y también para los códigos de la ciudad. Así que todo eso se tiene que hacer antes de que se pueda hacer una decisión.
Okay. All right. Does
Anybody
anybody,
want to give testimony in favor of this application?
¿Alguien quiere dar testimonio o declaración a favor de esta solicitud?
Anybody want to give testimony against this application?
¿Alguien quiere dar testimonio en contra de esta solicitud?
I believe there's someone on the Zoom call right now. That is, if Linda, if you can mute yourself. Go ahead.
Your name and address, please.
Su nombre y dirección, por favor. Sí, proceda, señoras.
Your name and address, please.
You can hear me?
Sí, te podemos escuchar. Su nombre y dirección.
Mi nombre es Elizabeth Almanzar, vivo en el 1139 Norte 11 Street, Reading, PA.
1139 Norte 11.
Correcto.
My name is Elizabeth Almanzar. ALMANZAR. And I live at 1139 North 11th Street, Reading, PA.
Please raise your right hand.
Levante su mano derecha.
Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
¿Usted jura
Yes.
que la declaración que usted va a dar la verdad, toda la verdad y nada más, va a decir la verdad, toda la verdad y nada más que la verdad?
Correcto.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Proceda.
Ok, ya estoy aquí para apelar, no apelar, pero para decir mi testimonio a favor de la señora Iluminada Muñoz, ya que ella es la persona encargada de cuidar a mis niños. mientras yo estoy-
Un momento. I am here to appeal. Not appeal, but testify in favor of Ms. Muñoz because she's the lady that provides care for my children when I am at work. Ajá, siga.
Ella es una persona que cuida a los niños muy bien. Ella siempre está pendiente de ellos. Provee, nosotros llevamos nuestra comida, pero también ella le provee comida. Siempre está al tanto de todos los niños que tiene a su cuidado.
Okay. She cares for the children very well. She's always looking out for their well-being. Even though I bring food, she is always providing food if needed, and she takes good care of them.
Anything else?
¿Algo más?
Otra cosa que también, como en mi caso, disculpe, me queda un poco cerca, porque está a pocos bloques de casa y la disponibilidad de ella siempre es excelente.
Okay. And something else is that is very near to my house. It's just a few blocks away, and she's always willing and available. She's excellent availability.
Any members of the board have any questions for this person, this lady?
No.
¿Algún miembro del comité tiene alguna pregunta para esta señora?
Anybody else in the audience have any questions for this witness? Hearing none, we'll close the evidentiary portion of this hearing. A decision will be rendered next month. You do not need to be present. A copy of the decision will be mailed to you.
Ok, no hay nadie más que tenga alguna pregunta. La decisión se va a hacer para el mes que viene. No tienen que estar presentes. Una copia de la decisión se les va a enviar por correo.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your participation.
Gracias a todos. Apreciamos su participación.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to Appeal 2411-0034, 353 North
Eso,
4th Street.
No, we're at Thorn Street.
Mhm.
Eso es todo, señor. Thank you very much for moving up the
Bill,
interpreter.
we're at
You're
Appeal
welcome.
2411-33.
Yeah, North Third and Thorn.
Right.
Okay. All right. Appeal 2411-0033, 730 North Third Street, 743 Thorn Street, 220 Douglas Street. This is TCM1 LLC and TCM2 LLC are seeking an appeal of the determination of the zoning administrator that a required buffer strip is not provided, that 2 off-street parking spaces are a non-compliant private driveway, and that a subdivision annexation and land development plan must be completed prior to receiving the required zoning relief. The applicants are also seeking a variance from the buffering requirements along the northern boundary line of 743 Thorn Street. The subject property is located in the R3 residential zoning district. The owners of records are TCM1 LLC and TCM2 LLC. Would you swear in our zoning officer, please?
Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Has notice for this appeal been given?
It has.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Price.
Thanks. I'll put some exhibits into the record. Exhibit number 1 is the notice. Exhibit number 2 is proof of publication of the notice. Exhibit number 3 is proof of posting of the notice. Exhibit number 4 is the application, including all of its attachments. And exhibit number 5 is the zoning ordinance of the city of Reading as amended.
Okay, are you represented by counsel?
Yes, good evening. Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart representing the applicant.
Okay, do you want to, you want to enter your appearance and we'll swear in anybody that you would like to have testify?
Sure, I have one intended witness, direct witness this evening, our surveyor, Daniel Loudenslayer.
Okay,
All right, will you please raise your right hand?
Yeah.
Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Spell your last name for me, please.
Laudenslayer.
Thank you.
The attorney's just setting up his Wi-Fi. 1 second. They should have sent to you. Or we can just directly send it to you. Which one's it? He's just setting up his computer because he had physical exhibits, so he's just setting up to be able to share on the Zoom.
Promise. Thank you.
Are we ready? Or-
Just about. I had brought physical copies of my exhibit to hand out to the board, not realizing the board members would be virtual. So I am logging into my computer so that I can try and share them through the screen.
Okay.
Just share as we.
You're muted, Rob.
Yes, I'm gonna speak here, and why don't I get started? I can certainly get started while I'm pulling up my exhibits. As I said, good evening, Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart, counsel for the applicant. As you mentioned, the applicant this evening being TMC One LLC and TMC Two LLC, who are the record owners of the properties located at 730 North 3rd Street, 743 Thorn Street, and 220 Douglas Street. I do have with me this evening, in addition to Mr. Loudenslayer, representatives of the ownership, Raul Tolentino and his father, also Raul Tolentino. I don't intend to call them on direct, but I do have them. And if the board hopefully notices, we do also have a pretty sizable crowd with us this evening. I do know that these properties have been the subject of a prior application. It was before this board a little bit more than a year ago with a relatively aggressive plan. Ultimately, the board denied the requests for relief that were related to that plan. Subsequent to that hearing, we did engage with the city and specifically with Emily to try and determine what we could do to address what we see as a significant neighborhood concern of off-street parking in the vicinity of these properties. And we wanted to do that in a way that was a by right plan. In July of last year, we actually began that process and obtained a zoning determination that the concept of a private off-street parking lot is actually a specifically permitted use in the R3 district. We were advised at that time, however, that any such lot and any resulting lots from any reconfiguration would need to comply with all applicable dimensional criteria within the R3 district. So our surveyor, Daniel, got to work. He prepared a plan that we believed complied with all the applicable criteria. The plan, generally speaking, proposed a lot line change between the vacant 743 Thorn Street lot and the 730 North 3rd Street lot that would facilitate creating a 12-space parking lot on Thorn Street while allowing the 730 North 3rd Street to retain sufficient ground to remain compliant with the applicable criteria and remain a through lot. And then provide the necessary off-street parking spaces on the Thorn Street side, something actually it currently does not provide. We submitted that plan both in conjunction with a required subdivision land development application, as well as a request for a zoning permit. On October 23rd of 2024, we received a denial of the zoning permit, which we believe to be an error. Before you this evening is now our appeal from that October 23rd, 2024 zoning permit denial, as well as an application for certain minor relief from the zoning code. It's important to note that this is not intended to be a rehash of what was in front of the board a little over a year ago, although the concepts are similar, and certainly the goal of alleviating the current issues with off-street parking remain the same. The layout is different, and the legal issues before you are certainly different. As is my practice, I brought hard copies of exhibit packages. I apologize for not sending them to you digitally. I think I will have the ability to pull them up as we go through this evening on my screen. If the board would allow me, I would like to try and identify them, and I have handed one to your zoning officer, so you have a hard copy. But if I can quickly run through what's in my exhibit package, I won't try and pull each and every one up on the screen now, but as we go through it with Daniel, the relevant information I will pull up on the screen. So in our exhibit packet, Exhibit A is simply a copy of the relevant deeds to the properties that I've already mentioned, evidencing ownership by TMC 1 LLC and TMC 2 LLC. It is important to note that 220 Douglas Street is the property owned by TMC 2 LLC. And the matter before you this evening only seeks determinations and or relief with respect to the Thorn Street and 3rd Street properties. But I have included the 220 Douglas Street property because it's obviously relevant. The parking lot that is being proposed is intended to serve staff and patrons of the 220 Douglas Street property. So I included that simply for the record to show that my client is also the record owner there. Again, not seeking any relief for 220 Douglas Street or any proposed improvements there. But again, important to note that 220 Douglas Street has been determined by the city to be a lawful non-conforming use. So we are not here to talk about whether or not a restaurant should be on that corner, whether or not it can continue to operate. It is lawful. It will continue to operate in that location. What we're here really to do tonight is try and obtain what we believe to be relatively minor relief so that we can try and alleviate a neighborhood problem, which is off-street parking. And it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for everybody in the neighborhood. Exhibit A2 in the packet is simply an overall aerial photograph depicting the 3 lots as well as the surrounding lots. I think I can bring that one up for the board. Hopefully I can get that to pop up. Give me 1 second as I try and do that. There we go. And I'm sure the board is familiar, but simply an aerial photograph showing the 3 properties. The red pin being located on the North 3rd Street property. Immediately to the left of that on this image, you can see the vacant property that is the Thorn Street property. And then immediately above that at the corner of Douglas and Thorn is the 220 Douglas Street property. So as I mentioned, my clients are proposing to improve only the 743 Thorn Street and 730 North 3rd Street properties. The 743 Thorn Street property, our proposal is to formalize its use for an off-street parking lot that can serve the staff and patrons of their restaurant that they own on the adjoining property. In July, as I mentioned, in July of 24, my clients filed a request for a zoning determination. So I did include a copy of that zoning determination in our exhibit packet at A3. Again, seeking confirmation that the use of the 743 Thorn Street parcel for off-street parking is in fact a permitted use in the R3 district. On that same day, July 8th, the zoning officer issued a determination. I did include that again as exhibit A4, confirming that that proposed use is permitted, but indicating that in order to do so, subdivision and land development approval would need to be obtained, and the resulting reconfigured lots of 743 Thorn Street and 730 3rd Street would need to comply with all applicable zoning regulations. On October 9th, my clients then submitted an application for preliminary subdivision and land development approval, as well as the required application for a zoning permit. I've included those as applicants exhibit A5. Again, I have them available, but I don't think we need to show those on the screen. The application was supported by a set of plans. And I think I have the plans available. I hope. Yeah, here we go. So I included as applicant's exhibit A6, a copy of the set of plans that was submitted with those applications. And as depicted on the plans, we are proposing to reconfigure 730 North Third Street and 743 Thorn Street to provide for a parking lot that provides, 14 spaces, not 12 spaces, that can serve the 220 Douglas Street staff and patrons. On October 23rd, as I did mention in my initial comments, the zoning officer issued a denial of the zoning permit. I marked that denial as applicant's exhibit A7. On November 21st of 2024, we appealed the zoning officer's denial of the zoning permit to this board and requested certain relief from the zoning code. I marked the appeal as applicant's exhibit A2, and I'll get into those specific requests in just a moment. I know I'm long-winded here this evening, but a lot to cover. Also included in the exhibit packet at exhibit A9, I do have specific copies of certain provisions of the zoning code. Hopefully the board has access to that digitally, or may even have it on your screen. In applicant's exhibit A10 are some actual photographs of the property, and I will share those shortly, showing 743 Thorn Street. And then lastly, applicant's exhibit A11 is simply the CV of our surveyor, Daniel Loudensley. So returning to what I had said about why we're here, we have appealed a couple of determinations set forth in the October 23rd denial of the zoning permit, specifically the determination that the proposed parking spaces located along Thorn Street serving 730 North Third Street constitute a driveway and therefore exceed the maximum permitted driveway width. As set forth in more detail in our appeal, we believe that the definitions or definitions set forth in the zoning ordinance, as well as plain and ordinary meaning of those terms, support the conclusion that those proposed improvements to 730 North Third Street constitute permitted off-street parking spaces, not a private driveway. As you'll see, they are configured that they back out immediately on to Thorn Street. There is no driveway connection to provide access from Thorn Street to the parking spaces. Those parking spaces simply back out onto the street, which I understand is not uncommon and in fact has been approved previously in the city of Reading. The determination had concluded that it was a private driveway, and a private driveway is limited to 14 feet in width. Because the requirements for a parking stall are 9 feet in width, to have 2 parking stalls, you must have 18 feet of access to the roadway. Again, we do not believe that that constitutes a driveway, and they are instead simply permitted parking spaces to serve 730 North Third Street. We also requested initially that the board conclude that the applicant has appropriately sought to resolve all zoning issues prior to obtaining subdivision and land development approval. It was unclear originally from the denial whether the denial was in part based on the fact that we hadn't yet obtained subdivision and land development approval. I'll discuss that in a moment at the end. We've gotten clarity on that from Emily from her staff memo. So I don't believe that that's an issue any longer. I think we're on the same page as to the order in which we need to obtain approvals. Second. The final issue raised in our appeal is an actual request for dimensional variance. That's from section 600-1401. The denial concludes that to permit a private off-street parking facility in the R3 district, a planted buffer is required along all property lines shared with residential properties. And I'm gonna just scroll down through applicants exhibit A6 here so that we at least have the relevant page visible. Go. In the R3 district, any private parking facility, although a permitted use, does require a planted buffer along all those property lines that adjoin residential uses. Our property line to the south, our property line to the east, and our property line to the north, all do have portions of which abut residential properties. We have proposed a compliant buffer along the southern property line, which is actually the property line shared with 730 North 3rd Street. We have provided the required 6-foot landscaping buffer to the east, which, if you can see my cursor, in this location, coming around to the corner. But because of an existing 6-foot tall concrete block wall that extends along our northern property line, juts in and then extends again, we are unable to provide a 6-foot wide planting buffer along this northern property line. As I think Emily pointed out in her staff memo, the site that would require the buffer extends from about where my cursor is now, back to where it shows L2. And as you'll see from the photographs of the property, there is an existing 6-foot tall concrete wall. We sit lower than the adjoining properties. That wall being structurally important to maintaining those properties. And the wall is actually the property line. It's on our site, but it is the property line. So we cannot simply remove the wall. It is structurally necessary. So we have requested a variance from the code from section 1401 to forego the plantings, which would be below that wall along that short stretch of our northern property line. That is the only variance request we have before you this evening. As I mentioned to you, we did receive the staff memo from Emily. I was much appreciative of that. And also, I think it helps clear up the issues a little bit, but unfortunately, I do have 2 more things that I think I need to clarify with the board based on that memo. As I said, Emily makes it very clear in the memo that she agrees that the procedure needs to be obtain any necessary zoning relief or approvals and then follow through with our subdivision land development. As I mentioned, we've already filed that application, and if we are able to obtain relief or if we have to modify our plan based on this evening, we will do so and then proceed through subdivision land development. So I think that has resolved, and to the extent there is an appeal of that portion of the denial, the October 23rd denial, that can be withdrawn because we are on the same page. As I mentioned, 2 other issues quickly. The staff memo states that we are appealing the determination that a buffer is required along that northern property line that I just highlighted for the board. I want to make clear, we do not disagree with Emily that the ordinance does require the buffer. So if our application to this board included an appeal saying that it was not applicable, that's not accurate. We do agree that a buffer is required there and therefore a variance is necessary. And that's why we have sought that variance from this board this evening. The final item raised in the memo has to do with the access points to the proposed parking lot. And then, as I discussed earlier, the 2 parking spaces which are located along the southern portion of our property. The memo states to me for the first time that section 1503B1 would apply to the driveway accessing the parking lot. And because that driveway is currently depicted at 22 feet, that driveway is non-compliant. That conclusion is not consistent with the denial. The denial did not have that in it. But I also think that that conclusion is in error. Section 1503B1 is actually a provision of the code that applies specifically to residential driveways. And it states that residential driveways are limited to 14 feet in width. This is not a residential driveway. it's a commercial driveway to a commercial parking lot serving the adjoining lawful use. Rather, in the ordinance, section 1503.B2 discusses the permitted maximum width of a curb cut for a commercial driveway and states that the commercial driveway can have a width of up to 20 feet. And we will comply with that maximum 20-foot width. So I just wanted to make sure that the board is aware that our application this evening, as far as I am concerned, or in my opinion, really only has 2 items. I know there's a lot of talking to get to 2 items. But one, our appeal of the denial on the basis that we believe that these 2 parking spaces here do not constitute a driveway. They're simply off-street parking, and therefore 1503.B1 does not apply. They can each be 9 feet wide for a total width of 18 feet. And then our request for dimensional variance in part to forego landscaping on one portion of our northern boundary as a result of the block wall located in that portion of the site. So I know that was a lot of me talking to get to that point. If the board doesn't have any immediate questions for me, I will call Daniel Loudenslayer and have him testify.
I think what we want to do is see if the board has any questions and then see if anybody in the audience has any questions of you. So board members, do any of you have any questions? All right.
No.
Emily, any questions? Steve, any questions?
No.
Okay.
I have
Anybody?
just one question, but I think I'll ask it, and then if it's something that Dan can address, then Dan will address it.
Great.
My question is, so for the property on North Third Street, 730 North Third Street, as only approved for a single family home, single family dwellings are permitted to stack their parking. Would your applicant be willing to, instead of having their 2 parking spaces side by side, would they be willing to stack them? That way you only have a 9-foot drive and then you wouldn't need any relief for that?
I don't think that we necessarily have any objection to that. It's a challenge, obviously.
Mhm.
Somebody has to pull out
Yeah.
potentially. I know it happens, but would that be acceptable to simply stack those instead of side by side?
Well, the problem we have with that is the frontage requirements. We have 50 feet on Third Street, but the ordinance requires us to have 18 feet of frontage.
So it's an average of the 2. The way that we do it to make sure for width purposes is if there's 2 different widths, if one of them is technically shorter than what's necessary, we average the widths. And so when you average the 2 widths, then it's compliant with the lot width. Cause it's basically, you're creating a panhandle right there.
So I could make the stem coming onto Thorn Street narrower than 18 feet.
Well, you would keep the stem that same width, it's just that the driveway cut, so now you would have, you could keep grass maybe on both sides or on one side. And then just the entrance to the lot to get to the parking would be the 9 feet. You are permitted to do that in a 1-family dwelling.
Okay, we
Do you understand that issue?
So, in order to keep this matter moving, Mr. Loudenslager, you're gonna be admitted as an expert because you've testified in front of a number of boards that I represent, as well as the Reading Zoning Hearing Board. With respect to the 2 parking spaces, why don't we allow the applicant to discuss that at their leisure at some other date, and they can send me an email about whether they're willing to agree to that or not.
And I do, it sounds like we don't have an objection to reorganizing those 2 parking spaces. So that we can move on to the one issue that we really have before us this evening.
All right, and brevity would be appreciated.
I'll do my best. All right. Daniel, I know we just went through, just for the record, I do want to offer Daniel to be admitted as an expert in site design and surveying. Is that acceptable to the board?
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
said he was admitted.
I just wanted to make sure, for the record, I apologize, I'm not trying to belabor the points. Daniel, you heard me make general presentation this evening, with respect to the conditions of the properties, correct?
Yes.
And I, put into an applicant's exhibit package at A6, a set of plans. Those plans I'm gonna put up on the screen momentarily. These plans were prepared by you or at your direction? correct?
Yes.
Okay. Daniel, walk the board through very briefly, the proposal for 730 North Third Street, 743, Thorn Street. Your vote.
Well, parking has always been a problem in the city. You have an old city that comes from horse and buggy days, and now you have cars, people have multiple cars. So the object is to try to make a parking lot that is efficient and to maximize the number of parking lot spaces for the spaces within the ordinance requirements. So based on Emily, we have to keep the 18 feet. My total width across this property is to make a 6-foot landscaping bed, an 18-foot parking space, a 22-foot driveway, an 18-foot parking space, and then another 6-foot landscaping bed. I need 70 feet, and I got 67. And that is my dilemma. Now, what I did is I put the landscaping beds where it would be most advantageous to the residential areas. And I pushed the parking spaces up to the wall, which is 6 to 8 feet tall at some places. As you can see, when you look at that picture, the right-hand corner, that wall is about 6 feet high. We're gonna have to cut the parking lot down to achieve the 5% that's required by the ordinance for parking spaces over 10. So that wall is gonna be probably about 10 feet tall till we're done. We're gonna have to do some underpinning for the wall. So trying to get a landscaping bed in there, the only way we could do it is probably by losing 4 parking spaces.
And I do want to go back and ask a few questions as well, but in order to do that, you're talking about putting landscaping below the wall on our side on this photo, which is applicant's exhibit A10, where my cursor is now. We would be required to make plantings on our side of that wall to comply. In order to plant that small section of buffer, we would lose 4 or more parking spaces in this lot.
Correct, and usually those buffers are to keep headlights and different, from going on to other people's property. I think the wall provides a buffer for that situation. As far as putting green areas, I tried to widen some other areas up to give, so that we could have a place to plant trees and landscape the parking lot acceptable.
And just let me interject something. That white structure above the wall and going away from the parking lot, that is actually the old Tommy's, Sofritos. That's the outdoor dining and drinking area, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me come back again to this plan real quick. Apologize that I have to stop share and reshare every time, but they're different applications on my computer. Okay. So Dan, the plan that you have prepared is applicant's exhibit A6 that's up on the screen for the board tonight. But for the portion of the buffer that we just discussed along the northern property line and the jog, that is all encumbered by that wall. The remainder of the plan complies with all the applicable criteria to permit this parking facility, correct?
Yes, except I erred and made the driveway cut 22 feet, and I can certainly revise that to 20 feet.
Excellent.
I apologize.
And am I correct that the wall that we're speaking of here is a physical feature of the property that existed? It is not something that was created as part of this process?
No, that's you'd call call it a historic wall. It's been there a long time.
And that wall is also structurally important to the adjoining properties.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, I believe in your own response, the wall effectively serves as a buffer if a buffer's intent, one of the intents of the buffer is to provide shielding from headlights and so forth.
Yes.
Also, I think we're going to resolve the issue with 730 North 3rd Street, but your plan, this overall plan with the annexation and the reconfiguring of the lots does result in a compliant lot for 730 North 3rd Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm skipping a lot of questions to try and keep it short, so just provided me a moment or two here to get through it real quick. We covered that the wall cannot be removed, correct? And Dan, I think we talked, you had said there needs 70 feet to create cross sections.
Yes.
And we have 67 feet.
Yes.
That would seem to indicate that there's roughly, the wall's probably almost a foot thick, so there's roughly 2 feet between the wall and the edge of the parking spaces. Can you describe for the board what can or can't be done, in your opinion, within that 2 feet?
Well, we're gonna have to excavate. If we can move ahead, we're gonna have to excavate to see the condition of the footing of that wall, and we may have to underpin it. Or put some kind of retaining wall to support it. Because it's either that or we'd have to get a relief for the 5% grade.
And so you're talking about the fact that you can see the topography in applicant's exhibit A10, correct? And
yes,
the ordinance requires that there be no greater than 5% grade, either from 3rd Street to Thorn Street or from Douglas Street across the lot. So you
yes,
have to comply with 5% in both directions.
right.
And to accomplish that, because of the existing topography, you're gonna have to do some grading along that wall, in this case, excavation. And so, am I correct that your belief is that some or all of that 2 feet, you're going to need to maintain the structural integrity of that wall?
Correct.
To the extent that 2 feet was not necessary, would the applicant agree to keep that 2 feet green?
That would be my intent. Yeah.
Okay, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to plant anything significant in that area, correct? Because it could, in and of itself, jeopardize the structural integrity of the wall.
Correct.
And it's also going to obviously be shaded by the wall.
Correct.
Okay. Dan, in your opinion, if the board were to grant that dimensional relief to allow us to forego that buffer in that limited section of the property, do you believe that that's going to have any detrimental impact on the public health, safety, or welfare?
I don't believe it would.
Do you think granting that relief would in any way impair the appropriate use or enjoyment of adjoining properties?
I don't believe it would.
And based on your plan A6 and the photograph, do you believe that you have minimized the extent of relief that we're requesting this evening?
That was my goal, to try to do it, and I just couldn't squeeze enough land out of there.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the direct questions I have for Dan.
Okay, anybody in the audience, excuse me, anybody on the board have any questions? Okay, Emily, questions?
No, just if they could just confirm via email, you would still maintain that 18-foot wide along Thorn, but you would just stack the parking, so the cut is only 9 feet.
We can do that, and that would make that area, I think, nicer.
Yeah.
If we can do that, so we can do that for the land development plan.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Steve?
I have no questions.
Okay, anybody in the audience have any questions?
We have a couple in the audience here in the room. If you guys wanted to, whoever wants to go first, if you want to pull your chair here so that you're by the mic.
You need to give us your name and your address.
This is for questions only right now.
Right.
My question is, how big are the parking spaces?
Your name and address, please.
Fritz Rothenberg, 329 Douglas Street.
Okay, your question, sir?
How big are the parking spaces?
9 by 18,
Okay, and you still don't have enough width of the
just
site.
a little bit, yeah.
I commend the plan for having landscaping because other proposals that come before the board don't provide landscaping. The other question I had was, what kind of drainage control do you have at the driveways? There is some slope, I believe, that goes east to west. And will there be drainage that flows into the street, and how will that be controlled?
Well, we did infiltration testing so that we can provide 2 beds with underground detention with infiltration. That should make it better than what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rothenberg. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Loudenslager?
Yes.
Your name and address, please.
Michael Louder, 836 Center Avenue,
Spell that.
L-A-U-T like Tom, E-R.
The first name was?
Michael,
Thank you.
I'm a little confused about the 2 spaces. Are they directed to be used by the 730 North Third, the homeowners there?
For the through lot, yes.
Okay, and the combined between all those parking spaces and the other spaces, how many on-street parking spaces have you lost or will lose, assuming that you?
Okay, do we lose any?
Well, if they're parking along the curb and Thorn Street, I think they park on both sides.
They do.
So it really makes it incredibly narrow. The parallel parking spaces in the city are 8 by 20s. So we would lose 1 parking space for our entrance, and you would lose one parking space, more or less, or half a parking space to get into the through lot.
So you are not counting the areas that are,
In all honesty,
what you're saying is you would be able to park between those 2 curb cuts.
Yes.
That's more than 24 feet.
That's more than 24 feet. Okay. And my other question, and I'm not quite sure who answers this, you mentioned that this is going to relieve parking issues for the neighborhood. Is that indicating that the neighborhood will be allowed to park on this parking lot?
The goal here is to get patrons and the staff who currently need to park on street off of the street. Hopefully then allowing street parking to be more readily available for the neighborhood. That's the goal. So these would be made available for customers and staff.
Only.
Correct.
And what is maybe you don't know the answer to this. What would be the signage or whatever to keep people off of that? Or how would you control neighborhood?
So we still have another step after this evening, even if we are successful this evening, we have to go through planning. And during that planning process, the city will discuss with us, among other things, signage. And so at that point, we can address exactly what signs the city wants put up. You see signs a lot of places that say parking for customers only, things like of that nature. So I would imagine during that planning process, we'll have a specification of the sign. It'll be reviewed by city planning, and we'll go in it during that time. Okay.
Thank you.
Your question?
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Loudenslager?
I don't know if it's Mr. Loudenslager or Emily. My name is Lori, Lori Bellman, Bellman. I live at 329 Douglas Street. My question is, this is a parking lot in an R3 residential zone. Can somebody please explain to me how that is a permitted use for a non-conforming use for a separate property that's not these owners?
It is, they are the same owners.
Okay, well, I'm hearing LLC 1 and LLC 2.
If they're the same,
Okay.
these are the owners, they run both LLCs, and so a surface parking lot is a permitted accessory use to a permitted use in the area. Whether or not it's non-conforming doesn't particularly matter. The restaurant is permitted, and therefore the accessory parking would be a permitted by right accessory use.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, hearing none. Anybody want to give testimony in favor of this application? Anybody want to testify against this
I
application?
think we have someone to give testimony in favor.
All right,
Good evening,
your name
Nate
and
Rivera.
address, your name and address.
Nate Rivera, Nate Rivera, Rivera,
Where do you
201 Windsor Street in the city of Reading.
All right,
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
go ahead.
So I've been involved in plenty of meetings, probably dozens, probably hundreds of them throughout the years, throughout 20 years. And it's always been an issue that parking, a lot of businesses can't open because they don't have enough parking. And now we have a situation where there's a business that spending a lot of money trying to create parking to relieve a problem that a neighborhood has. And I think is very adequate and very, it's a blessing for all the neighbors, because I live 2 blocks away. It's a blessing for all the neighbors that we have somebody that's willing to invest probably $100,000-$200,000 to create parking. And because they're concerned about their neighbors, they're not required to have parking to operate, but they want to give their neighbors, they're being good neighbors, and they want to create relief for their neighbors. So I think it's in the best interest of this board that's been around for a long time, and I have seen numerous cases throughout the years that parking is an issue, and we have a situation where the issue can be resolved by approving this application, and I'm 100% in favor of it. And I believe if a lot of people knew and would stay in touch, they would be here also, because parking is an issue, and this can be part of the solution. Have a good night.
Anybody have any questions from the board for this witness? Hearing none. Anybody in the audience have any questions for this witness? I presume the applicant doesn't. Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody want to testify against this application?
We have a few, if whoever wants to go first.
All right, so here's how we're gonna handle this. If the first person gets up and says we're against this because we don't like it for whatever reason, and you're gonna testify the same way, we don't need to hear it 2 and 3 times. You just get up, you get sworn in, you say your name and address, and you say, if I were to testify, I would have testified like the previous witness. And then that'll preserve your rights on the record. All right, any questions? Hearing none, let's get the first person who wants to testify against this. Who's that?
My name is Leslie McGann, McGann.
And where do you reside?
Live at 724 North 3rd Street.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
In September of 2022, the parking lot issue came up and we went before the zoning board at the time. I went around the neighborhood within 1 block of the Platinum and told people about the proposed parking lot and asked them if they wanted to sign a petition saying that they did or didn't want the parking lot. 37 people signed saying they didn't want the parking lot, and I submitted those signatures at that time to the board. I still have a photocopy of the original signatures. When I walked around and told people about the parking lot, many people told me that there's always been problems with the bar. I understand that the bar already has permission to be there. I'm not questioning that. That they felt that there were problems with drunken behavior, poor behavior, and with accidents with cars coming out, damaging parked cars and then driving away. I didn't know that there were problems with the previous versions of the bar, Tommy's and Sofrito's. I think that the goal of the parking lot is not to alleviate parking for the neighborhood, but so that we can increase the volume of business for Platinum. And that, to my understanding, is a change of use if you are increasing it. So the business used to be primarily a walk-in local bar and restaurant. And there was a little bit of parking in the neighborhood, but by putting in a parking lot, you're allowing for a greater volume of business. And that's a change of use for a non-conforming. It's allowed to be open if it stays the same.
Let
It's
me,
not
let me
allowed
just,
to change.
let me just stop you, sir. Okay, you gotta understand the issues in front of the zoning hearing board. It's not about whether there's a parking lot's an approved use. It is, it's allowed in the zoning district. They are requesting one variance from buffering along the area where that wall was. That is the only issue now in front of the zoning hearing board.
And I understand that. And my problem with that is that when they cut down the trees, we called the city and said, you know, they're cutting down the trees. And the city said, well, we can't tell people whether or not they can cut trees down on their property. And I said, well, they want to cut down the trees because they want to put in a parking lot. Well, you can't say what they're going to do. Well, they told us they wanted to put a parking lot. Then they dug out the backyard and we called the city and the city says, well, you can't tell people they can't dig out their backyard, but they're doing it to put in a parking lot. Well, you can't say what they're going to do with it. Now, you know, we're here and we're saying, we want to give them a variance for the beautification of the parking lot, but we're not discussing the parking lot. So it all comes back to whether or not we're going to allow the parking lot. And
That, sir, I don't mean to be abrupt with you, but the parking lot is an allowed use in this zoning district. So that issue is not in front of the board.
I see.
The issue regarding the buffering along that wall, which backs up to the rear of what used to be Tommy's and Sofrito's, which is Douglas Street. So you can talk about the buffering, you can talk about that, but we're not going to talk about the parking lot because it's not relevant.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, Steve, I missed a message here in the chat that there is someone on the Zoom that had a question regarding the wall. Not sure if we could open up for one more question.
She has a question about the wall
Yes,
and she wants to ask Mr. Laudenslager.
yes.
All right.
Hello, my name is Yvette Morales and I live at 736 North 3rd Street. So when he showed us the wall, my property, the backyard is part of that wall. So my question is, when they're doing and because he was talking about digging out and the construction and what they needed to do, is that going to affect any of the structure there? And if it does affect the structure, who is responsible for repairing that structure now? Because if I didn't commit the break on the structure, do I have to now pay for it, or will the company pay for that?
Well, I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that that wall is their responsibility. They put it in. And I'm sure Mr. Laudenslager will ensure that it won't structurally affect your property.
Yeah, because my property is exactly on the corner. It ends on one of those corners.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking, because that wall, I know it's part of it. So that's my concern as a property owner.
And Mr. Laudenslager, you'll make sure that you do a pre-construction if you get your approval and whatnot and talk to the neighbors, correct?
Yes, I believe the wall is entirely on the Thorn Street property, so it is supporting the neighbor's property, and they rightly have a concern. We need to underpin those walls in our grading operation so that those walls are preserved and remain the way they are. So we wouldn't be damaging her property. If something happened, it would be required to be fixed.
Because I'm only asking that because where you see the wood at, that property belongs to my a neighbor adjacent to me, but right next to that is my property.
Right.
So that whole corner part is where my property ends. So I am concerned about that piece. So I know they're going to be digging out, and in the past, people have dug and cleaned and so forth. So I'm concerned if something will happen to the property. But
You heard that
Yeah.
you heard that Mr. Loudenslager is gonna talk to you before they do anything. and
okay,
Just keep an eye on it if they, if they get their permission.
okay. I just wanted to make sure I have all my paperwork here. I just wanted to go on the record.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
All righty.
Anybody else have any comments they want to make against this proposal? All right, seeing none.
We have one person. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm coming back. It's Michael Louder, 836 Center Avenue.
Okay. Were you sworn? He needs to be sworn.
He was sworn already.
He was?
I don't think I was actually.
No.
Oh, please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And I understand, Mr. Price, what you had said earlier about what we're talking about this evening. I just want to make a comment that, you know, the neighborhood came out a while back and this plan had been denied for various reasons. And I don't understand how those reasons have changed. The parking lot was denied for several reasons. And those reasons aren't part of the buffering or the driveway. Some of the things that were brought out were noise, traffic issues, all those things that were listed in the denial over a year ago. So my question is, how does that happen? How did we get here with the same issues? And I would say that some of the things that the neighborhood brought up back then have actually ended up happening. We had a shooting there right over the weekend. The canopy out front was torched. So there are issues that I think the zoning hearing board and the zoning should be aware of to take in consideration when they decide. I understand that's not part of what we're talking about tonight, but I don't know why it's not part of what we're talking about tonight. I just think that should be on the record. Thank you.
All right, it's on the record. Okay, anybody else want to give testimony against this application? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the evidentiary portion. We'll admit your exhibits, sir. They were what, 1 through 11?
Sure.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so A 1 through 11, unless somebody objects to them, they're admitted. And give a copy of those to Emily, so we have them for the record, please.
I have done so.
Okay, so I'm sure the board's gonna have to deliberate with this case and the other cases we've heard tonight, and we have one more to hear.
Yep.
So no decision will be made tonight. A decision will be made at the February meeting. You don't have to be present. A copy will be mailed to you. Make sure you give your card to Emily so we have your contact information.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Have a nice evening. Be safe. All right, last hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, appeal 2411-0034, 353 North 4th Street. Wilson Jara is seeking a special exception approval to restore the previous non-conforming use of 1 commercial unit and 2 dwelling units. The subject property is located in the R3 residential zoning district, and the owner of record is Wilson Jara. Would you swear in our zoning officer, please?
Do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Has notice for this appeal been given?
It has.
Mr. Price?
Thanks. I put some exhibits into the record. Exhibit number 1 is the notice. Exhibit number 2 is proof of posting of the notice. Exhibit number 3 is proof of publication of the notice. Exhibit number 4 is the application, including all of its attachments. And exhibit number 5 is the zoning ordinance of the city of Reading as amended.
I think one of the things that, before we get into this, that everybody should be aware of is that some of the things contained in this application will need to be considered by city council as part of a conditional use application. So I want people to understand that it's more than just this board. It might be involved in this. So having said that, whomever is representing the people, enter your appearance, swear in anybody you're going to have testify, and you can begin.
Jill Nagy's representing the applicant.
Okay.
Want to enter your appearance, Ms. Nagy?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Jill Nagy, 35 South Duke Street, York, PA 17401. On behalf of the applicant, I also have with me this evening Massimo Calario, who will be the contractor for the applicant. If it pleases the board, and I'll defer to Mr. Price, I'd like to do an offer of proof due to the simplicity of the application, as well as the chairman indicated, this would require a potentially second step after we get over this initial hurdle.
Right, and I got a chance to review the application and the notes by staff. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one point clear. The one issue that was raised by staff, and appropriately so, but I think the law, even though the zoning ordinance says that if a use hasn't occurred in 12 months, a non-conforming use, it's considered abandoned. Under the law in Pennsylvania, that's just not the case. You have to take affirmative steps to abandon it. So the prior commercial use and 2 residential uses should be still allowed. And I don't think the applicant needs to request relief for that, but I'll defer to you, Mr. Chairman, and the board.
We want to.
If I could just add, in the zoning ordinance, we also state that if it's condemned and they haven't taken steps to remove that condemnation, that would also constitute abandonment, but I'll defer to you guys.
But they are going to take steps to fix it up, correct?
Yeah, now they are. It was condemned in 2013.
Right.
Okay, why don't you proceed, and we'll sort this all out at some point. So.
Sure. What the board has in front of you is the plans that were submitted as part of the application. And basically what you can see at the intersection of North 4th Street and Buttonwood Street is the outline of where this existing building was that was previously a tavern and 2 apartments. What I'd like to point out to the board is the application acknowledges 3 parking spaces. Across the street, you see 6 parking spaces that are shaded in by the sidewalk. If you can see my cursor, those are being leased by my client so that in addition to the 3 parking spaces that have previously been designated as non-conforming, those parking spaces would be designated for this use across the street so that we would ensure that we don't have a parking problem, which has come up at various times this evening. And looking at the proposal, you'll see on the next page the actual 3 parking spaces that were part of the nonconformity as of 2013 that served the tavern and the 2 apartments. What we're proposing is to actually refurbish the entire structure. We're not intending to do any off-site improvements because that was one of the questions I had on staff's report as far as a minor land development plan. We're not intending to do any outside reservations, but take advantage of existing parking spots across the street and existing parking spaces on our property. Thereafter, there would be 3 apartments that we would suggest, and going back to the chairman's comment that we would need some conditional use approval. They would be 2-bedroom units. All of the 2-bedroom units have been designed in order to comply with the zoning ordinance of the city of Reading, with their various layouts. And we've given not only a layout, but a partial view so that the board can see exactly what this would look out if you would approve the existence of the nonconformity. So there'd be 1 on each of the floors. So instead of a tavern, we would have 3 apartments, which I believe significantly meets the special exception criteria within the zoning ordinance of the city of Reading, because that will not lead to any additional traffic or congestion, and it would actually be less than the previous existing use. It would not create an undue burden on the population because it would not have that concentration of use on the first floor that previously had.
there would be appropriate air and light support, and is not detrimental to the public as this was a previous use. In fact, with the condemnation, my client would be improving this particular use and taking it out of condemnation status. So based upon the plans as speak for themselves, we would respectfully request that the board consider that the burden, and I would agree with Mr. Price from a legal standpoint, has been satisfied for a continuation of the non-conforming use to allow us to proceed to the City Council of the City of Reading for the conversion conditional use. And I would ask the contractor for my client, Massimo Clario, if he could be sworn, and ask Massimo if he agrees with the presentation that I have outlined once under oath.
Okay, why don't you do that, please?
All right, will you please raise your right hand? I don't know that I see him. Is he
Yeah,
on
I'm
there?
trying to get my camera's not working correct. I'm not trying to get the video up.
Put your hand up.
Yeah, my hand's up.
All right, do you swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Massimo, you heard representation that you'll be the contractor for this particular project,
Yes.
and you have worked with the architect. You outlined the designs that I've presented on the screen this evening.
Yes. So, I mean, I am the contractor. I'm also I'll be buying the property as well, purchasing it. So we're waiting for the settlement. But yeah, we work together for the design.
Okay. And you heard the presentation, including the lease of the 6 spaces across the street. Was my presentation this evening accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
And I'm willing to entertain any questions for myself or Mr. Calario on the exhibits that have been presented. Like I said, I just had one question on staff's report, and maybe that's better for the conditional use concerning land development, since we're not doing anything outside, but we have no issue with the question about the sewer.
I think that's a land development issue, Ms. Nagy. And those drawings were attached to your application, so they're already in the record, so you don't have to move for them separately.
Thank you.
I have no questions for Ms. Nagy or Mr. Colasso.
I just have one quick question or statement. I know you're going to lease parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to at least once a year notify zoning that you are continuing your leases? We have people that tell us they will lease spaces, properties get sold, they cancel leases, all kinds of things. So we would like some control to know that those additional spaces are going to be continued on a regular basis. So just consider that thought, please.
I think what we'd be agreeable to, Massimo, is providing the city with our application a copy of the lease. So whether it's 5 years or 10 years, you would at least know what the terms are. We can take out the price. Would that be a fair representation?
Yeah, I think that would be, quite fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other board members have any questions? Emily, any questions?
Just one question. So just to be clear, you are maintaining the commercial space, correct?
We're asking for the continuance of the non-conforming use, but we will have to go for a conversion so that we would have 3 residential spaces as opposed to the commercial. Is that accurate, Massimo?
No, there is still going to be a commercial space there.
Okay.
On the
Okay. There
first
still will be some
floor.
commercial.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an idea of maybe what kind of commercial you would like in there?
I don't. My goal is just to fix it, and then just put it for lease. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have any idea what barbershop use on. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. And then I guess this is more of a comment. We will need information on the restaurant that you're gonna be leasing parking from to make sure that they do have sufficient parking to lease to you.
Okay.
But that's all I have.
Anybody in the audience have any questions for Ms. Nagy or Massimo? Hearing none. Anybody in the audience want to testify in favor of this application? Hearing none. Anybody want to testify against this application? Hearing none. We'll close the evidentiary portion of this hearing, and I'm sure you've been sitting here for 2 hours, Ms. Nagy. You know that decision will be rendered at the February meeting. A copy will be mailed to you. You don't need to be present.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thanks for your patience.
No
Okay.
problem.